Hello, welcome back to Dragon Quest. We finally arrived at the end of the Erdrick Trilogy, or should I say, the beginning. The controversy that has followed me throughout this journey is that because Dragon Quest III is a prequel to 1 and 2, each of these remakes were made with that in mind, and 3 HD-2D was released first. Some have concluded that the proper play order, at least for the remakes, is 3, 1, and 2. But I don't roll like that, so my first Dragon Quest game was Dragon Quest I HD-2D Remake, which I reviewed late last year. It encapsulated the lonely atmosphere of a solo adventure really well. It's the simplest one, but might stand out more than the others for only giving you that one party member for the whole journey. This completely changed how I approached combat versus 2 and 3, and tons of other RPGs I've played. It had great vibes, it was short and sweet, and it intrigued me for what came before and after in the story. Dragon Quest II might be the most new of this remake trilogy. So much story was added that was never there. You now have a party, the party members talk, they have great personalities, fully developed arcs, and they added a fourth one to the team as well. Combat was more complex with each of them specializing in different areas, and there was a brand new post-game with fun challenges and extra story to serve as a meaningful finale to this beloved tale. Now, we go back to the start of it all with Dragon Quest III. We're gonna find out for sure if I made a mistake by playing in original release order. We're gonna look at the differences in gameplay from 2 to 3 and also the remake differences from 3 to 2. Since 3 Remake came out first, there's actually slightly less features compared to the 1 and 2 remake. And we're also gonna find out what's next for me in my Dragon Quest journey. So, let's get right to it. Dragon Quest III was released in 1988 for the Famicom. As usual with this franchise, it was a much bigger deal in Japan than in the US. It may have been the most anticipated video game ever at the time, selling over 1 million units in a day. That's like GTA numbers in modern terms. Every gamer was anticipating this release in Japan. Kids were arrested for skipping school to buy it. So many, in fact, that Enix had to change their policy of releasing video games from weekdays to weekends so teachers and managers would stop complaining. Thus, Dragon Quest was cemented as one of the most influential franchises in Japanese culture before it even finished its Famicom run. Over on the other side of the globe, some people bought it. You know, they took so long to localize it. By the time we got Dragon Warrior 3, we had already moved on to the Super Nintendo. It was 1992. We were already playing Final Fantasy IV, aka Final Fantasy II.
Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Game Boy.
It ain't over till it's over.
Chill out, man.
Japan was just a few months away from Dragon Quest V. 3 and 4 came out the same year for the NES, but neither could push the needle here. None of these sequels sold as well as the original, which didn't even sell that well. Only that original Dragon Warrior found its way into many American homes, but not necessarily because it was purchased. The biggest reason it might be common for ancient gamers to have a fond nostalgia for Dragon Warrior 1 specifically is because Nintendo had such a surplus of unsold units that they literally had to give them away for free, with a qualifying subscription to Nintendo Power Magazine.
Get ready for the biggest offer in history from Nintendo!
Subscribe now to Nintendo Power. Get a free Dragon Warrior game pack. That's a $40 value plus 12 big issues of scorching power tips and wicked video maps for $15.
Eat that!
It included a handbook with a backstory, a full map, a walkthrough. Man, they used to do stuff like that. Now we can't even get discs. Dragon Warrior's failure was turned into a successful subscription incentive that ended up being extremely profitable for Nintendo, enough to justify releasing the rest of the NES quadrilogy, even if they sold worse and worse. But by the next generation, there was just no point. There never was a Dragon Warrior 5 for the Super Nintendo. This was the start of the Dragon's Drought, where Enix just didn't bother bringing the games over at all until the 2000s. How could there be such a stark contrast between reception of a single franchise? What is it about Dragon Quest that we Americans just don't get? I'm still trying to figure that out. I am but a humble beginner. So let's look deep into the third entry, The Seeds of Salvation. The story opens with a distant voice, quizzing you, asking a bunch of very personal questions that you're supposed to answer honestly. This is a new way for the game to determine how your stats will grow. Based on your answers, it will categorize you into one of 46 different personalities that often heavily favor growth in one stat while potentially sacrificing growth in another stat. It's a lot different than the first game where the letters in your name determined all that. The name's no longer relevant here, so I just called him Norm. Permanent changes to how my character plays makes me nervous, so I did some research on this. There are a few personalities in the game that are just plain bad, like you don't want them, and you'll be weaker if you end up with them. This is a bad first impression for me. Getting put at a disadvantage because you answered opinionated questions wrong at the start of the game is not cool. It's giving Zodiac system from Tactics. I don't want to go down that road. Actually, one of the questions is, when were you born? And it uses that to find your Zodiac sign. Oh, no. I'm going to the internet for this one. They say Tough Cookie is pretty much the best personality in the game because it favors the most useful stats extra heavily. I found out how to be a tough cookie and answered the questions to get that result. But for the sake of curiosity, I took the quiz again in another save file and answered everything honestly, like I actually feel. She said I have the personality of a plugger. I'm a plugger? What is that? Well, in street slang, a plugger is a guy who finds you exclusive, hard-to-get goods. In gamer slang, a plugger is a guy who deliberately disconnects their internet to avoid losing a match online. In Australian slang, a plugger is a rubber flip-flop. Breaking one is known as busting a plugger. But be careful, because in street slang that would mean blowing Tom's head smooth off. And I know we don't want that. In Dragon Quest terms, this personality increases resilience and stamina quickly, but luck increases slowly. Ironically, this is just a slightly worse version of Tough Cookie. I probably would have been fine. Oh well, there's more to the test anyway. You get placed in this forest afterwards with an old man who tells you to head west, but if you see a nice rock, could you bring one back if it's not too much trouble? I guess this is testing to see if you're willing to do small favors for people, even if you got your own things to do. You head west and, yep, there's a big rock. Push it on over and the old man gives you $10 for your trouble. That was easy enough. I'll be on my way. Oh, another rock. Well, I guess I can push it, but did he even want another one? Apparently so. I got another $10. And the rock respawned again. If you do this 6 times, eventually you'll see the 6 appear behind his fence. Okay, that must be the end of it. Nope. This goes on for some time, actually. I must have Sisyphusian levels of curiosity because I kept pushing this rock. Just one more. Another. Surely something's going to happen. And there are other milestones to pass too. You start seeing the rocks stack more and more. It only stops once you've pushed 40 rocks over to this man, which is required to earn the Tough Cookie personality. Yes, the number of rocks you push factors into the result as well. What a way to start a video game. It's like, I hope you enjoy doing long-winded menial tasks for little reward because you are playing a JRPG, my friend. How could Americans hate this? So now it really starts. You wake up on your 16th birthday and mom tells you to head for the castle right away. The king is asking for you. You can refuse her orders though, which I did, just to see if it would actually let me, and it does. You can explore the town at your leisure before meeting the king. Not that there's really any benefit to doing that. Once you head in, the king tells you about an evil bad guy who you gotta kill, and you say, okay. I'm serious, that's about as much setup as the story gets this time. But before you head out on the quest, you need a party. Yes, herein lies the biggest difference between 2 and 3. Dragon Quest 2 has a decent amount of setup and plot that keeps the story moving. You simply continue the story and eventually friends will join you one by one. They are important, named characters who each have stakes in the fight. In Dragon Quest 3, you recruit random no-names from the local tavern to come with you. You get them all right at the start, they stick with you, they have absolutely no personality, barely any lines of dialogue throughout the whole journey. And that was a major disappointment for me. I always take issue with this style of RPG. If you've seen my Final Fantasy reviews, this is a common point of criticism. In fact, Final Fantasy III does the same thing. Instead of the personalized characters who lead the story as established in Final Fantasy II, they are traded away in exchange for a more customizable party. This way the player has the freedom to build each character to their liking without worrying about it conflicting with the character's true story identity. The Final Fantasy Tactics games also do this to an extent and was a major aggression for me there. At least the remake of Final Fantasy III attempted to give the party names and more dialogue. It wasn't much, but it was something. Given how much extra story was put into Dragon Quest II HD-2D Remake, you'd hope that they'd do a little more with 3. Unfortunately, this game has about as much plot as Dragon Quest I. There you had one silent protagonist, and now you have 4 silent protagonists. It's a lot weirder when you have a whole group of people who never talk to each other about anything happening around them. I don't ever believe this trade-off is worth it. Like Final Fantasy III, there's a job system. They're called vocations here. You recruit adventurers based on the vocations you want on your team. If you ever want to change, you can drop a guy off and pick up a brand new guy with a different vocation. They always start at level 1, so this isn't ideal, but later on you get the ability to change an existing character's vocation. All the adventurers start with a random name which you could overwrite with your own. You can change their hairstyle and gender. You can actually choose between a male or female Erdrick at the start of the game too. That's all fun, but there's too many variables to write consistent characters, so they're just all silent. My thing though is that you could still have the gameplay with real characters if you wanted to. Take out the ability to choose a name and gender. Have it so that instead of recruiting entirely new people, you have the option to reset a character back to one with a new job. It's a waste of time to throw away a character you've been using anyway. No one does that, and that's all you need to change. Now you can write a character how you want, except you just can't reference what they do in battle, because that'll change based on vocation. This is exactly how they approached the Final Fantasy III Remake party. Like, it's not a big deal. The important thing is having actual companions on the journey. I spent over 50 hours with these guys, and I didn't really care for them at all. There's only one problem with my solution in this system. You can actually choose the amount of party members you have as well. That option would also have to be removed for this to make any sense. You might be wondering why anyone would choose to have less than 4 party members, and there's no reason other than doing challenge runs, so I don't think this would be such a bad sacrifice either. But that's the end of that rant. I'm sure I'll go on it again someday for a different game. You can see how there isn't much in the realm of plot to discuss here. Some guy named Baramos is gonna destroy the world. Go get him. There is one thread that spins out through flashbacks along the way involving your dad, an axe-wielding adventurer named Ortega. He left the town long ago for the very same quest, but he failed and never returned. You follow in his footsteps, talking to people who may have crossed paths with him, hearing about his journey. You wonder if he's still out there somewhere. It's funny that I spent 2 games hearing all about how amazing the legendary Erdrick was, only to finally play the Erdrick game, which spends the whole time telling you about how amazing Ortega was. Where's the Ortega game? It sounds like he got up to a lot of pretty cool stuff. And he had a dwarf party member who actually talked to him. I just have Pierre. Now, I know Dragon Quest fans don't love these games for the story, at least not the written plot story. It's more about the quest itself, the vibes, the adventure. Credit where it's due, this is where Dragon Quest III succeeds more than the last 2. It has the most memorable moments. There is a bigger emphasis on discovery than before. I was told by some that it's better to turn quest objective markers off so that you're happening upon these moments naturally rather than putting the game on rails and rushing from point to point without thinking. It's something that's sort of been lost with modern games filled with all these hints and UI markers taking away from the experience in exchange for convenience. I didn't feel that was necessary in the last 2 games though, because they are pretty deliberate in telling you where exactly you need to go, whether they mark it on the map or not. But in 3, I would say it's a lot more fun just to explore and figure things out on your own. The lack of story allows for this freedom and natural discovery to immerse you in the quest so much more. When you discover a giant pyramid in the desert, you don't need the game to tell you there's something important in there. I could go through and list off a bunch of these moments, but I think it's best if they go unspoiled. We can at least talk about exploration in a general sense. Exploration and loot hunting might have been my favorite aspect of the previous two. Keeping track of the different colored doors and treasure chests so I can return when I found their special keys was so satisfying and fun. I explored Dragon Quest III in a similar fashion, but there turned out to be a lot less of those chests to find. They give you the magic key and ultimate key so early on relative to the last two games, which waited till you were close to the end. This is likely because the ultimate key was not in the original versions of 1 and 2, it was added in the remakes, whereas it was always a part of Dragon Quest III as an important story item you needed to get to continue so they couldn't fill the whole world with rare items like before. Sad, but it didn't take away from the enjoyment of looking around for secrets. There's still something to find in every corner of the game. Maybe too much to find. The mini medal count is now 110. And I think they went a little too far this time. It was pretty annoying to track down every last mini medal before. For as thorough as I was in 1 and 2, I still needed a guide to pick up the last handful of missed medals. In 3, I consider it nearly impossible to find all these without a guide. I'm used to them being in pots, barrels, or suspicious corners. You know, there should be something significant to clue you in on a medal being near. That's what made them fun to look for. But some of the medals in this game are out of control. They might just be on the blank floor with absolutely nothing giving it away. Look at this footage here. This is me trying to find a medal that I already know is there because a guide told me. I'm inching around. It says it's by this exit. Where? Oh, there it is. I had to be so precise for that. How would anyone know to look there? That's not the only example like that. My strategy of noting down the ones I found to make the later cleanup easier proved to be very useful again. And the mini medals aren't the only major collectible this time. There's also a whole monster collecting mechanic. The original game introduced monster arenas to the series, allowing the player to visit and bet money on who would win in a fight. Eventually, this evolved throughout the games until they let you recruit your own monsters and actually participate in the battles. So that was added in this remake. Sadly, there's no betting anymore, but it's still fun to search for monsters in the open world. You'll see them standing there waiting. Whether or not you can capture them depends on how sensitive they are to sight, sound, or smell. Basically, you have to use a consumable item to mask your scent, turn you invisible, or use the thieves' padfoot ability to sneak in and grab them. If you ever find a duplicate of a monster you already found, that will level that monster up, giving them a massive boost in stats to face the more difficult arenas. I'm usually not a huge fan of monster collecting in RPGs unless it's the main focus, but this system is so simple that it was hard not to engage with. There are 121 monsters in the game, and I caught them all. Some are sneakier than others, and some only come out at a certain time of day. Oh, yes, that's right. We have a day and night cycle in this one. That's pretty cool. Time spent in the overworld advances a real-time clock, and towns will behave differently if you visit them at night or day. Sleeping at an inn will prompt you with options to wake up during dawn, afternoon, dusk, or night. I don't think dawn or dusk affects anything other than a small handful of particularly sneaky monsters. I like what I'm seeing though. These extra details give the game a little more oomph. The monster collecting can still be tough if you want to find every last one, but things become so much easier if you have a monster wrangler in your party. That vocation gets a special ability early on that detects if a monster is available in your current room, a nearby room, or if it would be here at a different time of day. Also, with a wrangler, you don't need to use any special items or abilities to approach a monster, you just get to walk up to it and it'll automatically accept you. I originally didn't have a wrangler in my party, but once I learned about that, I immediately retired my mage and went for the wrangler instead. It just saves you so much headache. If only there was a tracking ability for mini medals. But that is basically all the new stuff involving exploration. We're still on the NES in spirit, so the rest is self-explanatory. Same stuff as the other games. You start on Aliahan Island and do some small questing there until you make it to the main overworld. Eventually you get a boat to sail around to other places. You get the idea. No underwater diving this time though. More cool stuff happens later, but I'll save it for the spoiler section. Let's move on and get into this vocation system. Vocations are the hot new thing. After having little to no character growth options in the previous two, you now have almost full control over what your party looks like and how they act in battle. It's just the main character, the only one with the hero vocation, who is not allowed to swap. Everyone else gets to choose between 8 right at the beginning of the game. You want a team of clowns? You can do that. It's not going to be fun, but you can do that. Here's where it differs from the Final Fantasy 3 and 5 style job systems I'm used to. You usually start with the basic jobs and unlock more as you go, being encouraged to experiment with the more complex or specialized jobs later, and eventually mashing them together to create synergized job hybrids, my personal favorite way to build a party in an RPG. With this, every job is available right at the start, with the exception of one we'll get to later. And there isn't a separate job level versus character level. You don't get the ability to change vocations until later in the game, so you have to commit. It's actually more similar to Final Fantasy 1 in that way. Choose wisely, or you could be in for a bad time. My first choice was as basic as can be, the warrior, a tanky guy who hits very hard. You can never go wrong with that. His name was Nelson. Next, I went with the other no-brainer choice, the priest, this game's main healer class. How could you not have a healer? The hero gains some nice healing abilities, so you can survive without a priest, but I'm always going to want a dedicated healer and support guy. It's just good optics. Also, reminder that Dragon Quest's revive abilities can and will miss, which is still the most annoying thing ever. The priest is the only vocation who can learn the revive spell that's guaranteed to work 100% of the time. That alone is invaluable for difficult fights. So yes, give me the priest, please. His name was Pierre. Finally, I originally chose to have a mage on my team, but as stated before, I swapped her out for a monster wrangler after realizing how convenient it would be to have one. Mages are obviously your offensive spellcaster, with a small helping of support abilities as well, but I was glad to get a little weird with it and work with a monster wrangler named Mem. Aside from her great use outside of battle, she was decently helpful in a fight. Okay, honestly, not a ton of great abilities, but she had some small healing when others were preoccupied. She was good with a boomerang, and in boss fights, she had one move in particular that always did hundreds of damage. Early on, she actually packed a bigger punch than Nelson. And to make this vocation even more unique, she's the only one who learns abilities not just by leveling up, but also by collecting monsters. When you reach certain milestones in your collection, she earns new moves. That's pretty cool, I like that. But she was definitely the weakest link of my crew. For other classes, there's the martial artist. He's a good damage dealer who's super fast and has high crit chance, but I'm still more of a warrior guy. There's the thief. I'm just never one to bring a thief along. Thieves don't impress me. They're fast, but their attacks don't hit as hard as the damaging classes, and their support stuff isn't as good as the support classes, so I always pass on them. Sometimes at the end of a battle, a thief will steal items from the enemy, which could be cool, but not worth a party slot in my opinion. The last two vocations are weird ones. You can be a merchant, and they don't do anything merchant-y outside of increasing the amount of gold you earn for winning a battle. They do earn one funny move where they spend a couple $100s to hire mercs that hit the enemy, but the rest of their kit is kinda weak. Last and least, we have the Gadabout. This is the clown class. They actually learn a few worthwhile support abilities. Their kit is better than the merchant, but their unique trait brings them down to worthless tier. They might just not listen to you. They often don't listen to you. They might instead choose to ramble drunkenly at the enemy or their allies, sometimes giving you debuffs. I guess that's what a clown would do in battle, although the female design is more like a Playboy bunny girl. Yeah, I've yet to mention this, but Dragon Quest has a weird obsession with bunny girls. They're all over the trilogy, sometimes around nightlife, hanging with rich people or rulers, sometimes just out and about for no particular reason. You might find equipable bunny ears, garter belts, and stuff like that in cabinets across the world. They don't change your appearance, and they provide terrible stats in battle. There's no point in them, but I guess it's supposed to just be funny. In the Dragon Quest universe, the bunny suit is just something girls wear. And now you can play as one. But anyway, gadabouts are a hindrance to your team. Why would you ever want one? Because they're one of a few ways to unlock the secret other vocation. At level 20, gadabouts can be changed to sages. Sages are one of the best vocations because they learn everything a priest and a mage can learn, but they're combined into one. And they have better stats in general. So I guess you gotta put some time in with the worst class before you can get the best class. That kinda makes sense, except you can also change anyone to a sage by finding one of 3 special consumable items in the world. It is a one-time use, but you're probably not gonna want more than one sage on your team anyway. Like, Do you really want to put up with that misery for 20 levels? I didn't. But speaking of changing vocations, we should talk about how that works, because it's not ideal at all in my opinion. At some point in the story, you reach the All Trades Abbey. This is the place that allows you to change vocations without getting a whole new recruit. It still sends you back to level 1, but it doesn't completely reset your stats. It cuts your stats in half, meaning by the time you get back up to the level you were when you switched, you'll be a lot stronger all around than you would have been if you never switched. Also, any abilities you learned from your previous vocation stay with you. So, it's similar to how other job systems work, but just a lot grindier. Having your stats is not the worst thing, but you're going to struggle to be any help to your team for a good amount of time while you play catch-up. They advise you not to switch everyone's job at once so others could pick up the temporary slack. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't find it very fun. One way or another, you're going to end up grinding. It just seems like an archaic way of going about it. If we're talking about an NES game, I'd give it some slack, but this is a full-on remake. If Dragon Quest 1 and 2's systems can be overhauled so much, if Final Fantasy III's Pixel Remaster could be so much more forgiving, why couldn't this? I'm not afraid of a little grinding, but there's one real reason why I think this system fails. If you want to learn all of the abilities of one vocation, you need to do that before switching, and that might take 90% of the game. Because it resets you to 1, you'll have to grind all the way back up again, right? If you're holding out for a specific ability like Kazing, the one guaranteed revive that Priest learns at level 38, then it would be smart to not switch your Priest until level 38. But by the time you get there, you're in the end game. You're pretty close to the final dungeon and you feel like you missed out on the whole vocation swapping mechanic entirely. Still, once you learn that ability, there's no reason to stay as Priest anymore, especially when Sage is like a direct upgrade. So you switch anyway, but it's the end game. So Pierre just isn't surviving. You gotta go do some metal slime hunting to grind him back up, especially before the final boss. But then another character gets their final ability and now they have to switch, go back to level 1. And did I mention for full 100% completion you have to get all abilities on all vocations? Yeah, that wasn't fun. Stat seeds are back from the previous games, but there are a whole lot more to find. You give a seed to a character and that stat goes up permanently. I've always hoarded them until the end game because I'm afraid of commitment, but because of the level reset mechanic, this is actually the ideal way to do it now. Say you give someone 10 strength seeds and strength goes up by 10. If they later switch vocations and go back to level 1, all stats get halved. So those 10 seeds you used ultimately have the effect of 5 seeds, and you get ripped off. But if you had waited until they switched to their final vocation, those 10 seeds benefit you to their full effect. Using a lot of seeds too early on makes you a lot weaker than you would have been. I don't like how that possibility is there. It's messy. Final Fantasy III's solution of having separate leveling systems so nothing has to reset is a much nicer experience. Resetting you to level 1 is just a poor solution by comparison. Granted, DQ3 came out a couple years before FF3, but I still would have liked a more revamped version in the HD modern day remake. I found in some cases, my character would play worse. After switching my monster wrangler, that one useful damage ability I mentioned before went from doing 300-ish damage to 100-ish. And I'm talking after she leveled up to the 30s. Maybe that's because I switched her to Gadabout. In my defense, I didn't know Gadabout was practically a meme class until it was too late. All I knew was she would learn Egg On at level 31. That was one of my most used abilities last time, so I was excited for it. At that point, I was in the final dungeon of the game, and she was actively hurting my party. And I was like, I don't want a drunk on my team when I face the final boss. So I went to grind again until she learned all those abilities, and I switched her to Thief because I just didn't have a Thief yet. It's just a hassle. I think I've made my point. But vocations aren't the only thing that influence your characters. You can't forget about personalities. I talked about that whole long process of choosing the starting personality of your hero, pushing a rock to an old man 40 times so you can be a tough cookie. Whatever personality you have affects which stats get bigger or lesser growth upon leveling up. If you're familiar with how natures work in Pokemon, it's like that. Your other party members start with a random personality. No quiz or rock pushing for them. Luckily, the farther you get in the game, the more opportunities you'll have to change one's personality. And they give you a convenient list to look at if you want to choose the best one for any of your crew. Certain accessories, when equipped in the first and only the first accessory slot, will temporarily overwrite whatever your current personality is. You gotta be careful because sometimes you'll equip something solely for its other effect without realizing it changes your personality. That happened to me a couple times. You'll also find books around the world that can permanently change the character's default personality. I don't know how important it is to stress about this mechanic, but I definitely did stress about it a little. I wanted to make sure everyone was being built the best way they could be. Nelson needed the strength of a paragon or a meathead for all I care. I just wanted to see strength go up. Pierre needed the wisdom of a genius. And Mem's a wild card. But I would notice that Pierre and Mem would die so much quicker than the other two, so I would try and pivot to give them a personality that favored health and defense. But then I noticed Pierre is slow, which is really bad for a healer because it's a huge difference if they can heal someone before an enemy kills them. So I switched to an agility favor. Did any of these decisions make a large difference in my team's performance? I don't know. I want to say yes, but if I didn't pay attention to this mechanic at all, I wonder if I would feel relatively the same anyway. Like in Pokemon, natures truly don't matter, unless you're getting competitive about it. It did get to the point where Pierre was going first consistently, and that was super nice, so I like to think it was worth the effort. When swapping vocations and going back to level 1, it's gotta be important there, because you're gonna level up so much faster than before. Whatever stat you favor is gonna be favored very heavily. I'm glad I put in all that rock pushing to get the tough cookie personality on my hero. I could rest easy knowing he was getting the good stat. Why is he a mule? About 2 hours into the game, I realized he had the mule personality. One of a handful of straight up bad personalities that nerf more stats than they buff. I had to look online. When and how did I become a mule when I verified his tough cookie status right after I completed the test and pushed those 40 rocks? Well, remember when Mom told you to go right to the castle instead of exploring the town? Turns out, if you tell her no, the game curses you with the mule personality without even telling you. It just happens in the background. It overwrites anything you said or any rocks you pushed and throws that data out because you didn't listen to Mom. You're a mule now. I just wanted to see what would happen if I said no. Now I had to scramble around and try to find a personality that wasn't garbage for my main character. Tough Cookie doesn't show up as an item in the game until like 25 hours in. And I'm not about to start the game over for this. But how annoying is that? Screw you, Mom. I'm running away from home and never coming back. So yeah, the new way of building out your party mostly did not resonate with me. I get what this system was going for, but I've played too many games now that achieve it much more successfully. I prefer the streamlined, well-paced growth of Dragon Quest II. It fits the streamlined, basic RPG combat that is more or less unchanged throughout this trilogy. Normally now is when I'd talk about the battle system, but what haven't I said? It's the same as last time, which was the same as the time before, mostly. Actually, it's missing something. Souped up abilities are not a thing in this one. I guess that was a mechanic they thought up after they remade 3. I'm not super crushed about it, but it had potential. Maybe we'll see them again in a future remake. The characters played a little differently than the DQ2 crew, but towards the end when I finally got all the abilities I was looking for, my strategy for fighting monsters was almost the same. Buff the warrior, debuff the enemy, and use the warrior's biggest damaging attack. Few bosses could do much of anything against this setup. The game up until the credits sequence felt pretty easy, yet a lot more grindy, which isn't a great combo. The resetting to level 1 thing puts a hard stop on the pace of what's already the longest journey of the 3. I held off on switching until the end game, but doing that might have meant I was weaker than I should have been for a period of time before then. That meant getting through random encounters was slower and I'd be using a lot of MP to heal in between them. When I did switch someone and level them back up, I was hoping for that level of satisfaction I'd get from other job system games. You know, having the ability of 2 vocations at once gives me a lot more room for new strategies and gives each character more value in a fight. But aside from the raw, all-around stat increase, I didn't feel like I gained much out of all of those new abilities. This major complaint I had with the last game is even more relevant now. Maybe a Dragon Quest expert can help me out here, but it seems so many abilities in these games do nothing for you. And it takes so much more grinding and so much more work to get abilities in this game that it was even more disappointing when I got something that was just useless to me. Grinding a Gadabout all the way to 45 took hours, and the only useful thing I got out of it was Egg On. Pierre, as a sage, had all the good support moves from a priest with all the good damaging spells from a mage. But I built him stats-wise to be a supporter, so when I used one of those offensive spells, it wouldn't do anything worthwhile. Not often was he even free to do damage because he was keeping the party alive with heals and buffs. The Final Fantasy equivalent of a white mage, black mage combo, which I had a few times in other games, was so much more satisfying and effective. My warrior Nelson switched to a martial artist because I was doubling down his strength stat, and that worked. He was super strong. But I did not use a single martial artist ability. Cutting Edge, the final warrior ability, simply did the most damage. There was no logical reason to use anything else. With how celebrated and beloved this entry is, I was quite surprised with how prototypical this system came across. I'm curious to see how it evolves come Dragon Quest V. We do have something new to talk about in the realm of combat: monster fighting. You're not searching the world collecting these guys for nothing. You gotta put them to work in the various arenas around the world. Each tournament features 3 or 4 battles in a row. Before entering, you look at your collection, see what abilities they have, and choose 3 to make your party. Battles are the same as normal combat, except you can't directly choose which ability to use and when. You can only give vague tactical orders like Show No Mercy, which has them using their best moves with no regard for MP, Fight Wisely, to play a little more conservatively, Focus on healing, if they can, or Don't use MP for just basic attacks. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but you can also set these options in all 3 of these remakes for your actual party. It makes fights go by more quickly, but it just felt wrong to me. I like having full control, so I never once used it. This was actually my first time working with it. It's all self-explanatory though. The monsters mostly do what you tell them to do, and if you can't make it through all the battles in the tournament, you lose some money, but you can come right back. Winning gets you a ton of money and sometimes a rare piece of equipment, so the arenas are probably the most worthwhile side content in the game. Since it mostly plays itself, it's just a matter of choosing a good enough team. I like the idea of this teaching you about specific mechanics. I remember 1 or 2 fights that were heavy on a certain debuff or elemental affinity that you could counter somehow. However, if you're good at collecting these guys, every single one of these tournaments can be beaten effortlessly with good old-fashioned brute force. Collecting another monster type that you already have will increase their level in these fights, giving an astronomical boost to their stats. Basically, anything that's level 2 is better in a fight than anything that's level 1. If you just look at who has the highest stats in your collection, put those guys in, have a healer present, set the fighters to show no mercy and the healer to focus on healing, you will probably win. It's truly as simple as that. With monster collecting being such a prominent part of the game, this is a sort of underwhelming payoff for the upwards of 100 monsters there are to collect, but it was fun enough in itself, I suppose. That's about all I have to say about Dragon Quest III before the endgame, though I will tease that that's where the game hides some of its best moments. So, let's enter spoiler territory and get into it. Skip to the conclusion if you don't want to hear any spoilers for 1, 2, or 3. Dragon Quest III's biggest strengths are in its sense of discovery and adventure. You get to explore a brand new, bigger world that lends you more freedom in how you explore it. One of the more exciting points is in the bottom left snowy isle, where the Shrine of the Everbird lies. Here's where you discover what a big chunk of the main quest is actually for: awakening the Everbird from this giant egg by collecting the magic sacred orbs. Oh, I've been waiting for this. Dragon Quest finally has its first airship moment. And it's even cooler than an airship, it's a rainbow bird guy. I recognize him from the Dragon Quest II True ending. My theory was correct that it was a nostalgic callback. But yeah, this grants you access to some secret spots you couldn't get to before, and the final dungeon, which is not actually the final dungeon. When beating Baramos at this castle, You find that there is a greater evil to take down, and you jump into a world of darkness to find him. But this world is not as scary as you thought it would be. You wake up in a familiar port, you step outside, and you hear an old soundtrack you haven't heard since the first game. You're in Alefgard. You can now fully explore the map from the previous games. Well, it's a little smaller, and it's a darker, more twisted version, but all the things you remember are there. Here's the guy that went on to invent the golem that guards Cantlin. Here's the guy that learns how to craft magic keys. Here's the inn where I slept with that random woman for an achievement. This is cool. Not a lot changed between 1 and 2, but many of the areas will subvert your expectations here in a fun way only a prequel can. I finally got to see what Damdara looks like before it got destroyed. This epic feeling of returning to where it all started so you can bring it to an end definitely serves as a major point towards the 1, 2, then 3 play order that I chose. If I started with 3, like so many told me, none of this would have meant anything to me. After another quest around Alefgard, you make it to the true final dungeon, and there you discover your dad, Ortega, who's been stuck in here for God knows how long fighting off against giant monsters. That's why they couldn't find him, he was trapped in this dark dimension. But alas, your reunion is cut short after he suffers a fatal injury. He dies in your arms with one final message to leave to deliver to his son back home.
Should you ever find yourself in Aliahan, look for my child and tell them I said this. I'm sorry. I wanted to make the world a better place. A place where you wouldn't have to be afraid. And I just wish I could have told you that I love you more than you'll ever know.
And so Norm and his crew defeat the true evil, Zoma, at the heart of the world, restoring light across Alefgard, but cutting off its connection with your home world, leaving you stranded here for the rest of time. You saved home, but you will not be able to return. The local king bestows the name Erdrick, meaning land-dwelling, upon you, and you set off into the distance, disappearing, hiding your helmet, sword, armor, and sacred amulet across the land for the next hero to find. And thus, the seeds of salvation were sown. The end. Until a post-credits scene teases the birth of Hargon, the main antagonist of Dragon Quest II. I thought he would have more setup in this game, but this is all he gets. Anyway, as far as the actual ending goes, I like it. But boy, is it a downer. You finally find your dad, and he dies. You save the world, but can never return. Mom is gonna stay alone in that house without ever knowing what happened to either of you. And the last thing I said to her was, "Screw you, I'm running away and never coming back." In a major point towards the 3, then 1 and 2 play order, this gives some much needed context towards the chronological final moment of the whole trilogy. Erdrick goes off and continues the bloodline. Generations later, the Dragon Quest I hero is born. He defeats the Dragon Lord, marries Princess Gwaelin. They have kids who rule the 3 nations and have kids of their own. These kids get together to save the world from Hargon in Dragon Quest II, and in the post-game, after beating the real final boss and everything else happens, you get to visit Erdrick's hometown of Aliahan on the back of the Everbird. The trilogy only truly comes to an end after you set foot in his old house hundreds of years later. That didn't mean much to me before, but I gotta admit, watching it back now made me pretty emotional. I didn't think they were capable of getting to me like that. Sure, that's not Erdrick's mom, and you're not Erdrick, but the implied generational connection these two have, causing them to just freeze and stare at each other, is so beautiful to me. After all this time and all this struggle, 3 games worth of it, the family can finally have closure. They finally make it back home. It's so much better of an ending than I gave it credit for originally. Dragon Quest II's postgame is required as far as I'm concerned now. But what about Dragon Quest III's postgame? I have different feelings about that. I already talked about monster collecting and how extra annoying mini-medal hunting was in this game. Once again, the rewards for collecting them all were underwhelming compared to the amount of work it took to find them. Such was the case in the previous games. I don't know why they don't just give you some crazy super weapon for it. You already had to have beaten the game and most of the post-game to see all 110 mini-medals. Just give me something cool. Other than that, the post-game is a series of challenges that gradually increase in difficulty. I really enjoyed what they gave me in the last game with the Cave of Confusion, the true final boss, and all that extra story, so I 100% completed Dragon Quest III as well. But unfortunately, there is no true final boss, no extra story, and the bonus dungeon sucks. Like, it really sucks. But first we have to get there. After the credits roll, you are told of a heavenly portal opening up in the castle of the Dragon Queen. Heading there brings you to a peaceful floating island with a dungeon in the middle. This isn't the bad one, but it is long and arduous, so you better come prepared. At the end, you reach the Cloud's Gate Citadel, a place that serves as a nice rest stop for what's next, the Cloud's Gate Tower. This is the exact same dungeon from Dragon Quest II with the same boss at the end, Zenlong, the wish-granting dragon. It's the same fight with the same special rules. You must defeat him in a certain number of turns in order to receive one of 7 wishes. If you want all 7, you must go through the dungeon and defeat him 7 times. That was pretty tedious, especially since I did it in the last game. It's the same boss, same dungeon. It's not that difficult, my brain went autopilot, but like, come on, 7 times? Are the wishes worth it? What kind of wishes can you get? You can unlock the secret final monster arena, bring Ortega back to life. What? Well, hold on. Become history's trendiest hero? Sorry, Dad, you're gonna have to wait. This lets you dye your party's hair into any color. I chose Orpal. You could wish for a powerful weapon, which grants you Rubus's sword, the strongest sword in the game. Very nice. You could wish for a copy of Guns and Buns, which turns a character's personality into Vamp, one of the best in the game. But at this point, it doesn't mean that much to me because we were at the end. Okay, fine, let's wish to bring Dad back to life. If you go back home, there's a new cutscene where Mom is all happy and he's there and all proud of you and stuff. I don't know though, it feels wrong. It can't be canon. Remember, all this stuff is post-game, but it technically happens before the ending. Otherwise, you would be trapped in Alfgard. I'm assuming this is just a what-if scenario, but it kind of undoes the emotional impact of Ortega's final moment. It just felt unnecessary to even have this. If you wish for a new monster arena, you can fight the final one over in Japan. By the time I got there, I had every monster in the game, including the last one, Zenlong himself. Or I guess he's called Zenrong here. I sent him and my other 2 most powerful monsters, and it was an effortless victory. I thought the difficulty would be jacked up because it's like a special bonus one, but no. The 6th wish is the secret empty space below the others. Same trick they did in the last game. This unlocks a secret portal above the seas north of Aliahan. But you have to beat Zenlong one more time to get the ultimate wish. A copy of more Guns and Buns.
All that you have seen, more than most do in a lifetime, has led you to the conclusion that you simply need more Guns and Buns.
This is a permanent item that can switch anyone's vocation to Sage without having to level Gadabout or finding the other consumable versions of this item. Nice, but again, this is the end of the game. We're approaching the very last challenge. I'm probably not switching vocations again. I had no use for this, but whatever, I got the achievement for beating Zenlong 7 times. There you go. Back to that secret portal. This is the final bonus dungeon. The bad one. It's called the Temple of Trials. 5 trials await you in the 5 different directions before you can enter the final door, and they're all a tremendous pain in the ass. Well, okay, not all of them. The first trial is fine. It just wants you to collect a certain number of monsters, which I already was doing, so I passed it easy. The second trial wants you to find very specific pieces of armor. 4 copies of each, and bring them in. You have no idea where they might be, so obviously I just looked them up. There's like only one specific store that sells this item, one specific store that sells the other item. They're all expensive, so I'm burning money now. So you just go on a quest to pick all of these up. It's a random fetch quest. Then at the end he wants 10 elfin elixirs, probably the most useful item in the game. It restores an ally's MP fully, and it can be used in battle. You can only buy them in the fairy village for 40,000 gold each. I was saving the ones I found, but I guess they gotta go now, and also I have no more money. I got drained of everything. Great. The third trial wants you to find some legendary items. This just forces you to do some side quests for useful items. It's actually nice because they don't take them from you. But the final 2 trials are the painful ones. These are traditional mini dungeons with a twist. You must use specific weapon types in each of them. If you don't, you automatically die in 1 hit and you deal no damage to anyone. The huge, glaring problem with this is that you may not be able to equip those specific weapons depending on your vocation. If that's the case, you're screwed. The first one asks for claws and boomerangs. My priest, my main healer, couldn't do that. Priests can't equip claws and boomerangs. Well, he was a sage at this point, but they still can't equip claws and boomerangs. So he couldn't survive a single attack. But he was the guy in charge of keeping everybody alive. It was miserable. Does this game expect you to switch vocations, reset to 1 again, and regrind a new class just to do this 1 mini dungeon? What kind of ask is that? No way am I doing that. It got to the point where I was just doing what I could to avoid encounters and sprint to the end. But then it gets worse. There's a boss at the end of the trial, and you have to fight it. It's 2 Pandora's boxes. These are extremely powerful enemies that hit super hard, may spawn another enemy, may use Thwack, the instant death attack, Blasto, which is like it blows you out of the battle, so it's like instant death, except you can't revive from it. They regen automatically every turn. They could Omni heal, which brings both of them back to max health, and they both act 3 times per turn, letting any of those things happen up to 3 times each. Are you on crack? How the hell am I supposed to deal with that? It's no use fighting the enemies they spawn because they immediately spawn another. I'm weak because of the weapons I'm forced to use, and they go back to max health practically every turn anyway. I could not imagine what you possibly do in this situation. So I went online in search of answers. Thankfully, everyone's as pissed off as I was about it, and I didn't find a single soul who did it through any method other than the Blasto strategy. Yeah, they can use Blasto, well, we can use Blasto too. Blasto blows an enemy away, and it doesn't count as a kill, so you don't receive XP, but it does get rid of an enemy instantly if it hits with its very low accuracy. Doesn't work on bosses, of course, but these are technically normal enemies, so it's good enough to win the fight. And that was the only reasonable play here. Only one problem for me. My sage is the only one in the party that knows Blasto, and he happens to be cursed with the die instantly debuff because he can't equip the weapons they want him to have. So I had Norm be a healer, not as good, but good enough. I had Nelson use Whipping Boy to absorb incoming damage from Pierre, the sage. Pierre was spamming Blasto as best he could, and Mem was doing whatever Mem does. After many tries and a lot of luck, we got rid of those boxes, and we finished off the last of the enemies they spawned. In a nearly unprecedented manner, a new wave of 4 more boxes appear immediately after. They have the same moveset and they each act 3 times a turn. That's 12 attacks that could potentially kill you instantly, wiping your party every single round. And you had no chance to pause and heal up between these waves. Once you get rid of 2 of the 4 boxes, then they start using Bounce. Bounce will reflect any spell used against them. So if I use Blasto, but they go first and use Bounce, Pierre will be removed from the battle, unable to be retrieved, and I am now stuck in an unwinnable fight, forced to restart back to the first wave. Somebody at Square Enix hates the world, and they were left on their own to make the worst fight ever. I don't know how else to explain it. It was already possible for them to use Blasto on you. Now they can reflect yours back. It's like they designed a fight with only one solution, and then at the end they introduce a direct counter to that solution. In an otherwise pretty damn easy game, how did something so mean-spirited make it in? If they use Bounce, you just have to wait it out for multiple turns until the effect wears off. Then you get about 1 turn where they're open for a Blasto before Bounce is set back up again. All the while, your party might be dying or very likely drained of MP, and every passing turn is another risk of unrecoverable death. This is sadistic. After even more time, more attempts, and way more luck, I blasted away the last of those godforsaken boxes, and it was finally over. And then the next trial is another mini dungeon with a different weapon limitation and the same exact fight of 2 Pandora's boxes followed by 4 more Pandora's boxes. At the end, I'm gonna blow my brains out. Who made this? So, you beat that, and all trials are complete. The door is unlocked to the final post-game boss across the Serpent's Bridge. After ascending to the big dungeon in the sky, climbing the Tower of the Clouds, beating Zenlong 7 times, conquering the Temple of Trials, you can now fight the Grand Dragon. He's a gold-colored reskin of the Hydra. And, it's a pretty normal boss fight. I beat him first try. And you are awarded with the Grand Medal for doing so. It's like a mini medal, but not so mini. And it serves no purpose. That is the whole post-game. The only thing I had left to do was learn all abilities, of which I was only missing the Merchant's, because Merchant just seemed useless to ever have. So I picked her, went to grind one last time, and I got that final achievement. Trilogy complete. I ended up feeling a lot more mixed on Dragon Quest III than I thought I would. It has one strength over the last 2, and that's in its memorable moments and set pieces. Moments that feel naturally occurring in the world and just ready to be discovered by you without being told, as opposed to the linear style storytelling moving along beat for beat. But that brings along many weaknesses. There's barely a story at all with this structure, and that's not too big a deal. It's not like the plots of the other 2 were super deep. These are all still NES games on the inside. But I missed the characters of Dragon Quest II. A lot was added in that remake to get you attached to them. And I've mentioned many times in this series the unique loneliness of Dragon Quest I, giving that game its own kind of feel you don't get in any RPG. Dragon Quest III doesn't quite have its own characterized party members. You have as many as you did in 2, but they're all as silent as your single guy in 1. It's not lonely, it's just awkward. Why doesn't anyone react to literally anything that happens? It's bothersome. I didn't grow to care for any of these party members because they were just tools. That's how the game presents them to you, and that's how you use them. They even encourage you to replace them at will with someone else if they seem like they'd serve you better. Even the hero feels like he has less personality than his other silent protagonist equivalents because there's no one there to bounce dialogue off of him. The vocation system is very messy. It bothered me a lot. I just kept thinking of how many easier ways there are to do this. I used to think Final Fantasy III was the earliest, most archaic form of an interchangeable job system, but now I've learned there was an even earlier prototype of it in this game. I can give it the benefit of the doubt for being so old, but I can also criticize this ground-up remake for changing nothing about the system, especially after so much was changed in Dragon Quest II. And for completionists out there, this is a grueling grind between the mini-medal hunting and the re-leveling characters multiple times and the ridiculous post-game challenges that are not fun nor rewarding. Unlike 2, which had a really fun post-game with engaging challenges and rewarded you with a hefty chunk of new story with its true ending and a beautiful cap on the trilogy as a whole, made even better now with the context of this game. If you haven't guessed, Dragon Quest II is my favorite so far, and 3 lags behind it. But I still liked 3, I'm not calling it bad, I was just expecting it to be a little more exceptional based on its legendary status. I can see how it would be mind-blowing at the time, but in 2026 it feels a bit outdated. I know the series has so much more to show me, but I don't know if I'm ready for it, to be honest. Not yet. I'm feeling some burnout after these 3 games. You know, something interesting about Dragon Quest as a series is people who don't like it usually don't because the games are way too similar to each other, and people who do like it usually do because the games are similar to each other. Some people find a comfort in that tradition and familiarity, while others feel it gets stale and uninteresting. And I know I played the most similar Dragon Quest games in the entire series, probably, coming from the simplest game console, remade by the same team in the same engine with the same mechanics, same graphics, same world, even the same music in places. But that staleness is getting to me. And I look at the other games in this series taking place in different worlds, even made by different teams, and they still don't seem all that different. Even 12 was going to be this big change up, and then they restarted development so they could make it more samey again. This series refuses to change, and I guess that's why people like it, but I don't think I do. I have over 130 hours of experience in the series now, and most of that has been walking into random encounters and spamming the A button to get through it fast, with little to no story or interesting mechanics to pull me along. They do have that spark of adventure to them. There is something beautiful between all 3 of these games, but it's just not enough to justify all that time spent grinding, basically. I'm not in a rush to get to Dragon Quest IV, though I do want to play it someday. I do want to see where the series goes. It's just that my options now are to emulate a DS game or play it on my phone in vertical orientation. Ew. Somehow, I don't think either of those experiences are going to help my interest in the series overall. So, for now, I hate to disappoint the Dragon Quest fans, but I'm going to take a break from the series. And part of the reason is everybody has the same hunch that this team will move on to giving us HD-2D remakes of the Zenithian Trilogy, 4, 5, and 6. I also feel like that's likely, though it may take some time. You have my word though, if that happens, I'll be there. I'll do the whole dang trilogy. But Erdrick's story is over. I want to try something else now. I don't know what that will be. Perhaps stay tuned for an update in the near future. And join the Discord if you please. Goodbye, Dragon Quest. I'll see you again someday.